Thanks for everyone for joining my talk. It's about how to make mistakes and get away with it. So we're all software engineers, QAs, work in tech. So all time we deal with production issues, outages, downtime, service failures, security issues, and these affect developers and engineers worldwide. And at the root of all of this, what is the leading cause that keeps developers sleeping at night? Well, it's actually bugs. So these ferocious little rascals find their way in our code, go to production and wreak havoc on our users, causing churn, loss of revenue, and frustrating users every day. And bugs can mess with how our application works, affecting their functionality, safety, and security. That's why debugging and managing these bugs is crucial for web development and development in general. It's a core part of what we do, and we need to ensure that everything runs smoothly. But who here knows why they're actually called bugs? Quite a few. Nice. Because personally, I always thought they're called bugs because they're gross and scary. But then why are they not called spiders or snakes? Snakes are scary, deadly, and much more dangerous than bugs, or something really scary like clowns. But the reason is that in 1947 at Harvard University, a team of computer scientists saw that their computer, a really big computer at the time, constantly gave out random errors. And after tinkering with the software and the firmware, they found nothing. So they decided to open up the computer, and on the motherboard, there was a big moth stuck to the electrical circuit that was causing problems. And then, like the moth, the name stuck around. It was made famous by Dr. Grace Hopper, who, among other things, helped create one of the oldest programming languages, which is COBOL. Now, personally, I don't find bugs scary at all. That's why I like to call them Bugs Bunny. Because think about it, Bugs Bunny never gave up. He always outwitted Elmer Fudd or Daffy Duck and found a way to get what he wanted. He repeatedly changed duck season to rabbit season, duck season, and tricked Elmer Fudd into shooting himself in the face. It's the same with bugs. No matter how much you try, how many QA people you throw at the product, how many automated tests with 100% coverage, there will always be a clever Bugs Bunny that tunnels his way into production. Bugs Bunny is inevitable. That's why it's our job as software engineers to be prepared. We need to always hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. We should also learn as much as possible from Bugs Bunny earlier attempts, so we block some tunnels that he did before so it don't happen again. And the most important is we mustn't let Bugs Bunny get fat, because he tries to get into our production, eat our carrots, and then he will be fat. That's why I'm here today. I want to talk to you about all my past mistakes, where Bugs Bunny has outwitted me and caused havoc in my life and made me shoot myself in the face. Now, most of these events were pretty sad and frustrating at the time, but now I can look back with fond memories. Even every time I could push code to production, I have a mental checklist that I go through all these scary scenarios and make sure they don't happen again. So before we start, here's a little bit about myself. My name is Neciu. I have been working as a front-end software engineer full stack for about 13 years. I'm currently co-founder and staff engineer at CareerOS. We're an HR and educational software for higher education. We help MBA students navigate the job process and get their dream job. I previously also worked in advertising, also as a developer for big brands like Coca-Cola, Peugeot, McDonald's, where we had to build campaign websites very fast to take advantage of something that has gone viral, like, for example, Brexit or a hot topic with celebrities, and you had to ship a viral product that's being used by millions of people. I also work for an e-commerce company in New York that was recently acquired by Victoria's Secret. And during Black Friday, we had millions and millions of dollars worth of sales. And all of our development process was for that day, for Black Friday in the United States. So we used to work like for 7 months just for that single day. And of course, everything went wrong in that day. And lastly, before my current role as a founder, I was a senior software engineer at Glovo, which is a food delivery company similar to Uber Eats. It's in 26 countries, and it had around 13 languages that the app was made in, and we had around 20 million daily users. And way back, before I actually was a software engineer, I did QA for Electronic Arts, and I actually worked on Need for Speed Underground, the first one, when it came out. Back when EA Games used to make good games. So with my history of working on different types of products, from e-commerce to food delivery, I can say that I'm very familiar with bugs and how frustrating it is to build, test, and ensure the quality of a product. I always remember my QA days when I was working on a game and I was testing it, and you were like 30 minutes on doing something, and then it broke, and you had to start over again. Super frustrating. So I joined my first company as a total programming noob. So I knew a thing here, there about what I learned in college, like data structures, dynamic programming, how to reverse a linked list, and of course, all of those were useless when I joined my first job. So as a web developer, I just knew how to position things with position absolute. But luckily, I joined the first company. It was very small. We were making small little browser games that were like point and click. And we were 3 developers or 4 developers. And we had a lot of like 7 or 8 projects going every week. So we were like overworked, which was a good thing for me because I got to like go deep into my first experience and do everything and learn very fast and no excuses. And also I had a mentor who took the time and the patience to tell me every time I asked him for something, he just looked at me and told me to Google it. And because of this, I grew very fast. And it also made me learn, grow, and experiments with all sorts of tools. At our company, we were building like a lot of WordPress websites, a lot of L apps, and a lot of browser games. So in my short stint in gaming, we had to build this really cute learning platform that was sort of a game for small children. So the concept was a big corporation wanted to sell milk cartons. So they had this idea, okay, they had a program with the government, and they wanted to teach the children how milk is made, how it reaches from the farms to their desks, because I'm from Romania, if I didn't mention. So every child that is below 4th grade, so 12 years old, they receive a lunch. So it's basically a milk carton and some food. So they had this idea to like promote milk drinking and teaching them how valuable it is and how it is made. So we were building this fantastic game experience, a point-and-click game that teach them about this project. The game itself was very straightforward, even for elementary school children, so they were like 7 to 10 years old. You had actually 3 mini games with the exact same mechanic. So you had all these little cows, and they had some thoughts, and you had to, when you saw a milk, you had to click on it. If you click on a hay, it didn't score any points, but when you click on a milk, you got some points. Now, if you had more clicks, good clicks in a row, you got double points and triple points, and you got a streak going. And of course, there were 3 types of game like this. The next one was in a class, and children would raise their hand, and you had to click on the children who raised the hand. And because there were 3 little games, you can always pause and move to another game. So you created this score-like thing. What we didn't count on was how driven 7-year-olds can be to actually get a lot of points, especially because we created a leaderboard. This was before we knew about gamification, so this was like 10 years, 11 years ago, before Duolingo made it popular for leaderboards and habit building and stuff like that. We just put it there for fun. And there were no prizes, so there was absolutely no prizes. Children played just for fun. And of course, we didn't count on them becoming so driven to be at the top. So after a weekend, after we launched this, a week after we launched, after a long weekend, we came back on Monday, and the leaderboard looked something like this. So we tested the game for months. Our company tested it. Then we gave it to the client, the big corporation. They tested it. And we did some user testing as well. We were very, very confident with the app we launched. And then when we saw this, our first thing was, someone joined, created a fake account, and cheated. They clicked inspect element in the browser, did something to send a bogus score to the backend. So what did we do is we saw the first 20 people that cheated, found their accounts, and just deleted them. Now, it was a little drastic, but before this game, we actually did one for adults with actual prizes, and they cheated. So we were already with this mentality that, okay, if something goes wrong, someone is cheating for sure. So, of course, we talked to the client before, is it okay to delete them? They said yes, we deleted them, and then we gave them the ban hammer. Nothing happened for a week, 2 weeks, we were fine, already working on different projects. And then we started getting emails and emails and emails from the client, from media outlets, because apparently we made 20 children cry. So all of them were blaming us for making 20 children cry, because when we banned them, everyone in their school saw that they got out from that 20 because they bragged about being on the top. Then they disappeared, and it got around, and people start calling them cheaters. And of course, what small children do, they go home crying to their parents. And the one thing scarier than one pissed off mom is 20 pissed off mothers banding together. So what they did is they banded together, they created like a Facebook group, they started calling the company, started calling the media groups. And of course, it took some time from this shit show to actually reach us, because we were a small outsourcing company. But when we did, we actually found out that one child figured it out how to double his score. So what he did is, when he had a streak going, he paused the game, and then he restarted. And then he noticed that his score went up a little bit. And then he did this multiple times, and then he noticed that it kept doubling, and doubling, and doubling, and doubling. And of course, what he did when he found this out is he told his friends. And then it became a competition, who could double their score the most. And that's how it became with the billions in the leaderboard. And we assumed they were cheating, but they were actually gaming the gaming experience, right? They found a security flaw in our system, a bug, and fixing it, it was actually just one line of code. It was actually an if statement that had multiple switch cases that checked if the value is the same as the one in the database, because that was the pause and start. And if it was supposed to update the database with the value that it was currently in the project. And because the coding was wrong, and it kept doubling. So we can safely say this line of code made 20 children cry, and the line of code was written in PHP. So we can now say that PHP makes even children cry, not just adults. So honestly, it was all PHP's fault. In the end, we fixed it, we apologized, we restored their accounts, we put them in the top 20, but not with the billions, very close to the person that was 21st, and we let the friendly competition continue. But what did I personally learn from all of this? Every game needs to be tested for potential breaking points, then stress tested, and then throw a hammer at it and test it again. We could have prevented this easily if we had an alert system when one score exceeded the medium, so had an alert in place for outliers. And of course, don't make rash decisions with your user's account. Explain and educate. and be nicer in general with your users. Don't ban them, especially children. Now, this next story still gives me a little bit of nightmares to this day. So it's unfortunately a story that's very popular enough to happen to everyone. I usually actually pride myself in not having push notifications on my phone, except for really, really critical things like pager duty or, for example, my bank. If my bank sends me a push notification, I get it every time. So one morning, I think it was 7 a.m., I got woken up by a push notification that said someone tried to take $50,000 out of my bank account. Of course, the bank thought it was fraudulent and they blocked it. So I saw that, I was like, oh, amazing, I have such a good bank. I was thinking like this, went back to sleep immediately, and in my half day's sleep, I was thinking, who tries to take $50,000 out of a bank account? That doesn't make sense. Why not try small? Why not try with like 500, see if it works, then increase if you have the bank account? They either must think I'm super, super rich, or it's actually a legit transaction. So immediately I jumped out of the bed, grabbed my phone, and checked the vendor that tried to take the money, and it was actually Google. Why couldn't it have been like a Nigerian prince or something? Obviously, I was horrified. I went white. I put down my phone and took a deep breath. My mind was already working on solutions and problems because actually I heard this. It was a popular story that happens quite often. You know, like you leave a CDN open for a static site and it gets DDoSed. Then you get a $100,000 bill. At the time, you had this very famous Firebase bill that happened where you got like $120,000 for 2 days. And even recently, there was this famous story about Carta, the portfolio website for designers. And it became so viral, and people started using it, and they were hosting it in a serverless state that it got like 90K per day in traffic. Now, of course, 7 years ago, it was different. There were not that many resources I could find, but also $50,000 was a lifetime, life-changing amount of money. You could buy a house in Romania with that kind of money back in the day. So I was contemplating solution. In my mind, I had to go to Google Cloud, see what resources I had in the Google infrastructure, because I was doing a lot of freelance, so I had like 50, 60 projects there, and I need to check what was, what do I need to move, because Google Cloud probably was going to shut down, or going to shut down my account. So how do I save my clients' projects to move them to another infrastructure? Then discover where the issue actually was, because now I was actually bleeding money. I was afraid if I go another day, it will bring me another $50,000. And finally, in step 3, find a nice place in the woods where I can live and off the grid, because I was never going to pay that amount of money to Google. So while I was looking through all my projects and hitting myself in the head, like how was I stupid enough to do this, I didn't find the bill. So I was like, okay, I got the bill. They tried to get my money. I checked the email. I had the bill there, but in my Google Cloud, I couldn't find the bill. So I searched again and again and again, and then finally I found it. The service was actually kind of stupid. So the company I was working on, someone there put my billing account by mistake instead of the company's billing account. So it was actually a legit big query transaction that happened, but the startup that I was working on in New York, but someone attached my billing account because I was using the same email, and that's how the fine was happening. So this was the biggest relief of my life. Like, I have never felt a heaviness lift from my shoulders like in that moment. So I was still like 25, 26 years old. So when this happens, like I went from being 50K in debt to Google to like a free man, ready to take advantage of the $300 credit they give me every month for starting a new account. So with the problem solved, I actually had to do something about it, because I researched and I started adding limits to all my cloud accounts. So every time a bill went above $100, I get an alert, and it blocks the spending account. Now, this is easy with Google Cloud and easy with Amazon, but it's not so easy with like hosting providers like Netlify or Strapi for headless or all sorts of these software as a service tools. They don't have this option like, hey, if it goes above this limit, you can just block it. They let you go crazy. But I actually found that if you talk to them, if this happens to you and you actually write their support and it was a legit problem, they usually help you out. So I set hard limits. What I actually did was integrate a monitoring system for usage, because usually the root cause for all of this is traffic. So if you have a strong firewall that blocks bots, you should be fine. So traffic spike can cause surging costs. Now, actually another example of this happened to me quite recently. It was very similar. We were using Mixpanel for our analytics service, and we changed our login strategy. So before people, when they were logging in, we were using a third-party provider like Auth0. So when you log in, you go to Auth0 and you set a redirect URL. And Auth0 sends you back to your app with all the credentials needed. Now, the problem was we changed this URL and we didn't think about users that are currently on the website. So we thought, we're going to change it, deploy it, and that's fine. But someone had a tab open, and what happened was when his cookies expired, he got sent to Auth0 to re-log in, and Auth0 sent him to an old, because he had the old code, sent him to an old page, which didn't recognize that he was logged in, that sent him back to Auth0. And this ping pong happened exactly 1 million times. And worst, in our application, on that particular page that he was getting ping pong to, we had this line of code that was doing, every time you come to the page, just track page visited. So this got tracked 1 million times into like 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Luckily, he closed the tab because it blocked. He was doing this ping pong really, really fast, and it broke his computer and his Chrome crashed. So that was luckily because at least it stopped like 2 million events. Unluckily, these 2 million events cost us like $20,000. We're still a startup, and $20,000 when this happened, which was a year ago, was a really, really serious charge. And we immediately went to their support and said, hey, we had this bug, help us out. Look, you can see that all of them were like in the same second. And at the end, we said, we know, worst case, we're just going to migrate to another service. We're never going to pay this money. Because we didn't tell them that, but every time we buy a service, we use a virtual card. So worst thing happens, we just close the card. Of course, they can sue us, but no one's going to do that. They were very understanding, so they closed that bill. And they said, please let this don't happen again. But things that I learned. Have limits and monitor traffic. Never have events or calls that trigger on page load. And of course, what I did after this happened was I abstracted the analytics part, and I made sure that I'm only sending 1 event per second per user, in case this happens again, because it did happen again. Infinite loops, it's a very common thing. And next time it happened, we didn't send events out of it. Now that we got the scary stuff out of the way, let's discuss some smaller fluff pieces. Let's talk about like the paint and glitter that makes our website really, really cute, like CSS. So every framework uses CSS or a superset of CSS to style their apps, right? It has grown, it's basically a programming language. It has variables, loops, animations. You can do really, really crazy stuff with CSS. And while Bugs Bunny can find his way here, we usually assume it's like a cute version of Bugs Bunny. You know, something is 2-3 pixels to the right, maybe something is blurred when it's not supposed to. Really not that big of a deal, as you would say. But here I was wrong. So with CSS, we had to build this button. So our product manager and designer thought, okay, let's make our website more fun, more dynamic. So when people are fetching data, let's, instead of the arrow on the Learn More button, let's just add a little spinner. Let's just add a little spinner. It shows the user that we're doing something, we're fetching data. He should wait for 1 second or 2 seconds. And when we did this, of course, we applied it to all the buttons, and we had this button in all our app, but also in all our forms, because that's how we were fetching the data. And unfortunately, one form that is very, very important in an e-commerce website is actually the checkout form. So we implemented this button everywhere, including the checkout form, but the problem was our checkout page was actually using a different framework than our normal website. So we were using, I don't remember actually, I think we were using a very small framework in our normal website, and Angular 1 in the checkout form, because we were afraid of migrating this 7-8-year-old Angular 1 project, because it was the checkout to one form and the other. And the problem was here, when the user put a Visa payment method, we were supposed to check that it's valid. So we had a backend request to see if the number is correct. So when this happened, we added the loading spinner, but because of how Angular 1 handled reactivity at the time, when we got the response back, the spinner never stopped. So the button was actually workable because we had end-to-end tests. So if you went and click on the button, it will work, it was fine. But users saw that loading there and they were like, I'm loading, and they were afraid to click it. What if I click it and it takes my money and and they just dropped off. Now the worst issue is, because the button was working, was that not everyone dropped off. Just a small bit of users dropped off. And we didn't notice it right away. So it took us like 3 months to realize that something was wrong. Because people were like going there, and like 18% of the people didn't click the button. And of course, our daily orders went down, but not that much that it would be like we could say, there's not something wrong in the app. Maybe people just don't order that much today. And then after a month, we were like, maybe we have a slower month. But then after 3 months, we saw and we're like, hey, these 3 months compared to these 3 months last year, it's exactly 18% drop-off. So what happened? And then we started investigating. And of course, we saw that the number of people who go to checkout was more or less the same this year with last year. So what's going on? Something is going wrong there. And then we saw this, when we were QAing, we saw that this button kept like loading. So what I personally learned from this is that simple is always better in critical parts of the application. So there's a reason Amazon website looks like it was made in 1990. Adding complexity to payments is something you actually don't want to do. So we didn't have this at the time, but visual tests can help you a lot with this. So it actually takes a picture of your website, does some things, then takes a picture of what's supposed to happen and compares the two. And having this in place would help solve us the problem. And of course, the most critical part of an application to monitor is the checkout form. So you should have event data for everything. So like button click, whatever in the checkout, and then compare them, have alerts in place when there's even a small anomaly for anything related to checkout. So now you know that saying fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, also shame on me. So this entire situation happened again to me, this time at Glovo, the food delivery company, 4 years later than the previous time. So me and my team were responsible for web performance. We were doing core web vitals. These were just becoming a thing like 4 years ago, and everyone was concerned with SEO. So our team was created, and its sole responsibility was to make the app fast and the JavaScript bundle small. And we did our analysis, we improved everything we could in the API calls, and then we moved the grunt of the work server side. And when we got to the JavaScript bundle, we noticed a third-party package that was being loaded in the main bundle every time. It was Element UI or something that we were using to just style our inputs, which were used in our Vue2 library at the time. So we only had a couple of inputs in the app, either in the sign-up form or in the checkout page. So we thought, okay, there's no point in loading this library in the entire app if it's only being used at the end. So let's just take it out of the main bundle and lazy load it once you get to the checkout page. So we did that, and guess what happened? We broke the exact payment method that I broke 4 years ago. The only good thing is this one, it wasn't me. It was actually someone in my team that did it. So what's actually funny is we caught it before we deployed it to production, but didn't do anything about it. Let me explain. So what we had at Glovo, we had a beta website. So first we deployed to the beta website, where internally all the employees of Glovo would use it to order food every day. So for 1 week, everything we deployed goes to the beta website, and if no one raises an alert, we deploy it to production after 1 week. And people raised it, but they raised it in a different form. So we had another select at the bottom in the footer where you could change languages. And people raised it like crazy that, hey, I cannot change the language, I cannot change the language. And because we had this huge number of commits inside the deploy on beta, we all decided it's not that big of a deal if users cannot change their language. We didn't realize that because they cannot change their language, they also cannot change their payment method on the checkout. So we deployed to production, and then orders went like this. When we, at lunchtime, we deployed at 11, at 12:15, everyone got pinged that orders went down. Now, luckily, we reverted, so it was only for like 45 minutes, but still. And the absurd thing we noticed that this was happening, and especially me, because I had this problem before, 4 years earlier, but this was what happened for me during dailies. Now, luckily, when my team broke production, I was actually working on something else, so it was not that big of a deal. And of course, this was during COVID time, so Zoom, everyone was on Zoom. So when my team was talking during Zoom calls, I was just like doing my own thing, didn't care. So what I learned, I really need to pay more attention in daily. If I would have been paying attention and I would have noticed that, hey, if one select is breaking, maybe check the checkout. And second, I saw firsthand how effective monitoring checkout events actually are. So it took us only 30 minutes of downtime of this happening before we got flagged. And then pager duty started going. And this and then afterwards, and this took me about 10 years to learn, but it showed me the value of a proper post-mortem or post-incident report to build. So what happens is, after an incident like this, the team gets together and they write a document explaining what went wrong. So what was the root cause, what happened, how much loss we have like in revenue, but most importantly, what can we do to make sure this never happens again? So then we created tickets, we made sure that, okay, check out this select will never, we had tests in place, if we change some CSS, it won't break the checkout. Now finally we reach one section that I know all developers dread, which is refactoring. Every time we have to do something, something goes wrong, we work for months to make something better, to clean up some technical debt, and we end up with something like this. 60% of the time, it works every time. This could be like the general motto for software engineers everywhere. Now, but joking aside, there are a couple of places I will never want to go refactor in a million years, like checkout, signups, and authentication. So you know that saying, why fix it if it ain't broke? And I've been part of companies that did it or tried to, and true to the saying, like 60% of the time, it broke every time. One of the worst was when we refactored the authentication system, we launched to millions of users, and then people saw each other's accounts. Yes, so it can get really, really worse. But let me talk to you about my last story. This is by far the greatest in my opinion, so I saved the best for last. So this was happening at the food delivery company around 3 years ago. We had pager duty, we had on-call staff, so every week there were 30, 40 people, each responsible for a service that were on call. And what happened is if there's an alert, they get pinged using pager duty, and they have to jump in a huddle and solve the issue. So what happened one day, we were in the kitchen, it was a normal Monday or Tuesday, and no, it was actually Monday, I remember, because we did releases during Monday. And we were sitting at lunch, eating, and then my pager duty went off. I took a look, and then I muted it and went back to eating. The reason I muted it is we were a very popular food delivery service in a lot of Eastern European countries, and a popular thing people did was try to hack us. So what happened was every Monday or Tuesday, we had like 100,000 bots try to like break our firewall and bring down the app. Now, thankfully, we were using like a really good firewall service from Amazon, and usually it got stopped. Like Amazon saw the IPs, did some magic thing, and like put down all of the bots. So they never reach our services. But then, while I muted it because I knew Amazon Firewall would handle it, and I was eating, but then I started hearing it around the office, like the pager duty alarm. And I was like, what's happening? And then I opened my phone again, and it was like 20 alarms and 20 like messages. The app is down, the app is down. Nobody can order, nobody can reach the app. Then I jumped, I went to my laptop, went directly to the huddle to see what's going on. And we had all sorts of people there like in the huddle. We had an emergency meeting. There were like staff engineers. The CTO entered the huddle. Like we were like 70 people inside the huddle. Everyone was like, what's going on? Is it this service? Is it this service? What's going on? And then it took our infrastructure engineers for like 30 minutes to figure out what happened. So we finally found out the attacker that brought down the app. And it was actually ourselves. So how did this happen? We're a pretty old company. We were been around for like 10 years. And we were using some outdated technology. One of them was Vue 2, so we were using a Nuxt implementation, which is like a server-side rendering framework for Vue. And some logic that was there was we migrated from old redirects to new redirects. So if people went to an old URL, they get redirected to the new URL. Which worked very well. It worked for Google bots, it worked for everything. And someone pushed a commit that actually changed the logic of these URLs very, very little, not noticeable, I would say. So what happened was when someone would go from the home page to the restaurant page, then to the store page to order food, it worked fine. The only problem was that because of this logic in the redirects, he was actually redirected to 3 other pages, or 4, and then went to that page. So it was not actually noticeable by the user, but behind the scenes, he went to 4 pages instead of 1. And because this happened at every request, the front end was making 25 more requests per user to the backend API. And of course, because of this, when the 1 o'clock came and people started ordering food, and all of a sudden the backend had 100%, like 20 times the same load, the AWS firewall service identified the culprit, which was the front-end application, and immediately banned it. So this was what was happening inside the application. So how does this error get in production? We had the end-to-end tests in place, but they didn't have a specific timeout. So, of course, if you had an end-to-end test to check from going to the home page to the checkout page, this still worked. But instead of taking 10 seconds, it took 45 seconds. And we didn't check that the number of requests that we're making to the backend actually multiplied by 100 times. So, what did I learn from this? Well, firstly, don't attack your own app. That's pretty bad. And finally, having end-to-end tests that are not that helpful. What we did is we actually mocked the entire backend. So obviously this was a really big problem for us. And then we were using this methodology called POMs for writing end-to-end tests. So basically we were not checking actually end-to-end tests. We were writing like homepage test. And all we want to test is, if I'm at the homepage, do I get to the next step in the funnel? Is that working? Then fine. Then on the next step, this was another test. Can I go further? And so forth. And all of them were passing in this situation. So yeah, afterwards what we did is we actually wrote a really good smoke test in production that checked everything with the resources and all that we had. So there you have it, 5 stories of failure that happened in my career. We had how to make children cry and get away with it, how to get away from a 50K bill from Google, how to style your CSS buttons so users don't click on them, how to remove CSS from your payments from, and how to bring down your app with extra requests. But in all seriousness, I did learn a lot of great things that made me a better developer. So empathize with your users and don't make rash decisions with their accounts. The importance of having alerts in place for scoring out of the ordinary in games or dips in orders and checkout events. Always prepare for the worst case scenario, have limits in place so you don't go bankrupt, or use virtual cards in your SaaS tools. And then every failure needs to be critically analyzed, and a document needs to be written to determine the root cause, how to prevent it, and how to make sure it never happens again. And then share this document with your entire organization, because it's really, really good for knowledge sharing. And finally, it will pass. I know you might think it's the end of the world, but I think all of us are developers. Some of us might even have deleted the users table in production. But you live and you learn, and next time it will be better. And in the end, we learn not to be mortal enemies with Bugs Bunny, but appreciate him for making our app stronger and better for every tunnel that he builds. If you want to learn more about me, you can scan this QR code. I will send you the slides. You can reach out on Twitter, Instagram, whatever, LinkedIn, if you have any questions. So, thank you.